poison in a goblet, a whisper in a dark corridor, a smile that hides a scheme. For centuries, Rome whispered the same name with both reverence and fear: Livia Drusilla. The woman who, some said, ruled Rome from the shadows. But who was she, before the rumors, before the legends of poisonings and palace plots? To understand her rise, we must begin in the crumbling days of the Roman Republic, when the city was tearing itself apart. Livia was born in 58 BCE into one of Rome's oldest aristocratic families, the Claudii. The Claudii were ancient, proud, and feared, but not loved. They were known for their coldness, their severity, their unbending pride. Livia inherited all of it: the sharp mind, the commanding presence, the ability to bend others to her will. But when she was still a teenager, civil war swept Rome. Generals raised armies against generals. Alliances shattered. Blood ran in the forum. And in this chaos, young Livia was married off, as so many women of her rank were, not for love, but for politics. Her first husband was Tiberius Claudius Nero, a man nearly 3 decades older than her, a loyalist of Julius Caesar's assassins. It was a dangerous marriage, tied to a dangerous cause. When Caesar fell, Rome exploded. Civil war tore across Italy. Her husband chose the losing side, and Livia, still only 16, found herself fleeing Rome while pregnant, her life dangling by a thread. She crossed battlefields, deserts, and seas, moving from one temporary refuge to another as Caesar's heir, the young Octavian, consolidated power. But survival sharpens the mind. Livia learned in those years how quickly fortunes could turn. She learned that Rome was no place for loyalty to ideals, only loyalty to survival. And when she finally returned to Rome, she stepped back into the city not as a frightened girl, but as a woman who knew how to play the game. It was then that fate intervened. One day, in the year 39 BCE, she was presented to Octavian himself, the man who had crushed her husband's cause, the man who would soon take the name Augustus and become the first emperor of Rome. And when Octavian saw her, everything changed. She was barely 20. He was 24. He was already married. She was heavily pregnant with her second child. And yet, to everyone's shock, Octavian fell for her instantly. The connection was electric. Some said he was struck by her beauty. Others said it was her intelligence, her composure, the way she carried herself like a queen even when fortune had turned against her. Whatever it was, Octavian wanted her, and in Rome, what Augustus wanted, Augustus took. Within months, Octavian divorced his wife. Livia divorced her husband. Scandal erupted across the city, whispers of adultery, outrage at their recklessness. But Octavian silenced the critics. The marriage went forward, and thus, the greatest partnership in Roman history began. From that moment on, Livia was more than just a wife. She was a partner in power. Rome was not ready for a woman like her. In public, she played the role of the perfect Roman matron, modest, silent, weaving in the shadows of the home. She dressed simply, spoke carefully, and cultivated the image of the dutiful wife. But behind the scenes, she was something else entirely. Advisors soon discovered that their petitions to Augustus were useless, unless Livia approved. Senators learned that her words carried weight in decisions of war and peace. Even generals whispered that the Empress could sway Augustus's mind when no one else could. She was always at his side. At the Senate, at public ceremonies, even in military camps, where other women were invisible, Livia was unmissable. And her influence grew deeper with every passing year. But power always breeds suspicion. Rome began to whisper. Every time a rival to Augustus died suddenly, eyes turned toward Livia. Every time an heir conveniently vanished, the rumors grew louder. Some said she was poisoning Augustus's rivals, even members of his own family. Some said she was slowly clearing the path, not for Augustus's natural heirs, but for her own son, Tiberius. No one could prove it. No one dared. But in Rome, fear was often proof enough. By the time Augustus secured his place as emperor, Livia had secured hers as something even rarer, the empress who ruled without a crown. She had no official office, no legal power. And yet, everything flowed through her. She knew everyone, watched everything, and maneuvered with a patience Rome had never seen. Augustus built the empire, but it was Livia who made sure it survived him. And as the years passed, the whispers grew louder. Was Augustus truly the master of Rome? Or was he merely the public face of an empire run by the woman at his side? One day, those whispers would explode into something darker, accusations of murder, betrayal, and dynastic manipulation. But that is the story yet to come. For now, Livia had risen from a fleeing girl, the pregnant wife of a defeated man, to the wife of the most powerful ruler the world had ever seen. Rome saw Augustus as emperor, but in the shadows, Livia had already begun to rule. The marble halls of the Palatine Hill glittered with gold, but beneath their polished shine ran currents of fear. At every feast, every ceremony, every quiet council, there was always one figure, serene, unshaken, watchful, Livia Drusilla. She played her role to perfection. To the public, she was the model of Roman virtue. She wore simple white wool, never jewels. She praised the old values of discipline and modesty. She never raised her voice in the Senate or the Forum. To ordinary Romans, she seemed almost invisible, the perfect image of a dutiful wife. But behind those closed doors, she was anything but invisible. Livia's voice whispered into Augustus's ear at every turn. When senators came with petitions, she sat beside him. When generals reported victories, she was present. She read letters, drafted responses, weighed in on appointments. Augustus trusted her more than anyone, and Rome knew it. If you wanted the emperor's favor, you first had to win hers. And yet, not all of Augustus's family trusted her. The emperor had children and grandchildren from other marriages, and each one was a potential heir. In Rome, succession was no small matter. Augustus needed someone to continue his dynasty after him. But every time an heir was chosen, tragedy seemed to strike. Marcellus, Augustus's young nephew and favorite, died suddenly at age 19. Gaius and Lucius Caesar, his grandsons and heirs, both perished before they could reach the throne, one from illness, the other in a suspicious accident in distant Armenia. And every time a rival heir fell, the whispers grew louder. Livia. Had she cleared the path? Did she use poison, Rome's favorite weapon in politics? No one dared speak the accusation aloud. But in the smoky back rooms of Rome's taverns, in the echoing corridors of the Senate, the suspicion hung in the air like a curse. One by one, Augustus's heirs vanished. And one name remained. Tiberius. Livia's son from her first marriage. A brooding, reluctant man, a skilled general, but never Augustus's first choice. In fact, Augustus had disliked him for years, sending him away, recalling him, then pushing him aside for others. But as fate, and perhaps Livia, would have it, those others never lasted. And slowly, step by step, Tiberius moved closer to the purple robe of power. Livia had played the game with patience. She had waited decades. She had watched rivals rise and fall. And with every loss Augustus suffered, she was there, the steady presence at his side, comforting him, guiding him, reminding him that only Tiberius could now secure the dynasty. Augustus resisted, but Rome itself was running out of options. And then came the most fateful whisper of all. In 14 CE, Augustus fell ill. For weeks he struggled, drifting in and out of fever. Livia was at his side constantly. She controlled access to his room, allowing some in, shutting others out. When messengers came with questions, she answered for him. When senators asked for direction, she spoke in his name. Some claim she even fed him figs from the gardens, and that one day, she smeared them with poison. Was it true? Did she kill the man she had ruled beside for 50 years? No one could prove it. But when Augustus finally breathed his last, it was Livia who stepped from the shadows and announced that he had declared Tiberius his heir. She had won. The little girl who had once fled Rome as a refugee, pregnant and powerless, had now secured the throne of the world's greatest empire for her own son. But victory came at a cost. Tiberius did not love her. He never forgot how she had controlled his life, how she had manipulated Augustus to make him emperor. Once in power, he pulled away from her, retreating to the island of Capri. And yet, even in his absence, Livia remained in Rome, wielding influence as the Empress mother. She held the title of Augusta. She controlled estates richer than many provinces. She received embassies, met with senators, and gave orders in her son's name. To some, she was a goddess on earth. To others, she was a spider at the center of a web. The people of Rome began to wonder, had Augustus ruled Rome at all? Or had Livia been the true empress all along? By now, she was more than a woman. She was a legend, a rumor, a force. And legends never stay clean. Every death in the dynasty, every lost heir, every shift in power, it all seemed to trace back to her hands. But was she a monster? Or simply the only one ruthless enough to keep the empire alive? The final act of her life would answer that question. Because even as her health failed, Livia refused to let go of power. She had ruled from the shadows for decades. Now, she would demand recognition in the light. The year was 14 CE. Augustus was gone, Tiberius wore the purple, and Rome braced for its new emperor. Yet in truth, many believed the real power still belonged to one figure, the woman who had outlived rivals, heirs, and even her own husband. Livia Drusilla. She was no longer just the wife of Augustus. She was now Julia Augusta, the mother of the emperor, the living embodiment of the Julian-Claudian dynasty. Statues of her stood across the empire. Temples rose in her honor. Foreign kings sent her gifts. Ambassadors bowed before her. To many Romans, she was untouchable, half mortal, half divine. But power is a dangerous thing, especially when it belongs to a woman in a man's world. Tiberius despised her influence. He had never wanted the throne, and now that it was his, he hated sharing it. To him, his mother was not a guiding hand, but a shadow looming over him, whispering, watching, undermining. Some said he even feared her, that he could never escape her control, even as emperor. At first, he tolerated her. After all, without her, he would never have become emperor. But tolerance soon curdled into resentment. Whenever she appeared in public, the people hailed her louder than him. Whenever she advised the Senate, her words carried more weight. And when decisions were made in the palace, whispers said they were not his at all, they were hers. For the first time in her life, Livia discovered what it felt like to have power slip away. Tiberius began cutting her off. He refused her entry to meetings. He blocked her decrees. He stopped listening to her counsel. Finally, in an act that shocked Rome, he withdrew to the island of Capri, leaving her to govern the capital, but only in appearance. From afar, he undermined her, rejected her requests, and denied her the recognition she demanded. Their feud became the talk of Rome. The people gossiped that the emperor and his mother were at war, a silent, poisonous war that played out in decrees, in ceremonies, in who was honored and who was not. And then, in 29 CE, the inevitable happened. Livia fell ill. She was over 80 years old, her health failing after decades of influence. Even then, she clung to her authority. She still held audiences, still wrote letters, still commanded respect. But her body could no longer keep pace with her will. When she finally died, Rome erupted in mourning. Crowds filled the streets. Senators prepared to declare her a goddess, just as Augustus had been. They wanted to honor her with a funeral worthy of an empress, to place her among the divine, to carve her name into the eternal memory of Rome. But Tiberius refused. The emperor did not attend her funeral. He blocked her deification. He ordered that her honors be stripped, that her memory be restrained. Even in death, he sought to silence her shadow. It was only years later, under her grandson Claudius, that Livia was finally declared divine. Temples were raised. Priests were appointed in her name. She became not just the empress who ruled from the shadows, but a goddess in the Roman pantheon. Yet the whispers never faded. Was she the loving wife who steadied Augustus and preserved his empire? Or the cold manipulator who cleared the path with poison and intrigue, sacrificing anyone, even Augustus himself, to raise her son to power? The truth may be forever lost, buried beneath centuries of rumor, scandal, and political propaganda. But one fact remains undeniable. Livia Drusilla, born into chaos, married to defeat, scorned as a woman, rose to a place no Roman woman had ever stood before. For half a century, she shaped the destiny of an empire, not from the throne, but from the shadows. Rome worshipped Augustus as the first emperor. But perhaps, behind every decision, every heir, every law, it was really Livia who ruled. So was she the first true empress of Rome? Or was she its most dangerous phantom, a woman who wore no crown, yet held more power than any man? History still asks the question. And maybe that is her greatest victory, that centuries later, we are still not sure if Rome was Augustus's empire or Livia's.